Good evening, I hope everyone's well today. Thank you for watching as always. I've seen a video clip from a former Prime Minister Liz Truss, and I think it's worth discussing and bringing up on my channel. She blames essentially the blob and the permanent bureaucracy in the United Kingdom, the deep state, the civil service, the unelected bureaucrats all over the country for the reason why her government, her premiership ended prematurely, shortly after the passing of the late Queen. She's got half a point, and I will give her credit for having half a point, but she's also dead wrong in certain circumstances. So I think that's worthy of me unpacking and maybe critiquing the clip. Now, I'm going to play segments of the clip and I'm going to intersperse it with my commentary as we go through. I think you'll find it instructive and informative, so I'm going to begin now. Thank you.
Let's talk about the state, or more specifically, the deep state. You say the Bank of England sabotaged you. The Treasury, Civil Service. Tell our viewers and listeners about this deep state and the people who really are controlling our governments.
I think it's important for people to understand, because people think the Prime Minister is all powerful, or the Chancellor is all powerful, and they can go into government and they can just pull the levers and things will happen. But actually,
I'm going to be very clear straight away, she's on a loser here. The Prime Minister is all powerful. That's the legal reality of our constitutional setup in the United Kingdom. The absolute powers of the monarch, peace, war, recognising countries, unrecognising countries, all the powers of states, who gets citizenship, who can stay, who can go, who can spend money, who can't spend money. All of these powers are royal powers because they're exercised under the royal prerogative, which is the customary privilege that's afforded to the sovereign, but those powers are put into commission with elected civilians. That is the political system of the United Kingdom. She is going to go on in a moment and she's going to start blaming other people and not taking responsibility herself. I'm going to play a bit more. That's the legal reality, and she is saying that's not the case. That is wrong. Either she's misinformed or she's being deliberately obtuse, she's being deliberately stupid.
the government is controlled by the permanent bureaucracy, by the civil service. It's them who hire and fire the people that work in the government. They control the budgets of each government department. Okay. They make the decisions about how policies are implemented.
I'm not saying what she is saying here, there isn't some truth in what she's saying. I'm saying the Prime Minister is the legal embodiment of the Crown and Parliament. They act on the prerogative powers. There may be a permanent bureaucracy, the civil service, that implement government decision. They may try and steer conversations in the direction that they want to go. They may say this isn't legal, this isn't lawful, this isn't practical, blah 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 blah. However, the Prime Minister needs to sign all of this off as the elected representative, alright? If the civil service is being deliberately obstructive, if the civil service is blocking you, or you get the feeling that they are blocking you, you need a united parliamentary party behind you. That is not something that Liz Truss had.
So even if a policy has been signed off by a minister, it's a civil servant who says whether it's legal. It's a civil servant who...
Back to that again, the civil service can say if it's legal or not. There is not much a united parliamentary party cannot do. If something is illegal, they can make it legal. If something is unlawful, they can write legislation to get it through the Commons, and they can explicitly say we are making it legal and lawful. When we didn't get people deported because the civil service or a court challenge said that technically, I think it was the Supreme Court, which was only set up in 2009, said this is unlawful, and that made the government back away. Said, right, we can't touch it because it's not lawful. Parliament can make anything lawful. The Crown and Parliament is sovereign. It can make anything lawful. It can make anything legal. That is the whole point of parliamentary sovereignty and the parliamentary democracy that we're meant to be living in. When the Tories had a disunited party and they didn't get anything of substance through other than carry on with the consensus that Tony Blair started back in 1997. That was by design. The reason both major political parties, Labour and the Tories, are broad centrist coalitions is because it favours the setup that's already there. That is why the two-party system needs to be smashed, for this very reason. This is why nothing of substance ever gets done, ever gets put through. Liz Truss is blaming everybody but herself.
Who implements it, it's a civil servant who signs off the budget for it. And that gives those people a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Bank of England governor has what I would describe as unaccountable power.
She's going to go on to the Bank of England now. We need to be clear, the Bank of England only became independent completely from government in 1997. That was Blair and Brown's one of their first reforms, was to make it independent from government completely, and it wasn't going to be controlled by the Chancellor anymore. That could have been reversed by the Tories in their 14 years in power. They could have reversed that. They could have brought it back to what it was pre-1997. They didn't do it. And now you get a former Tory Prime Minister, Liz Truss, saying, well, we couldn't do it because the Bank of England stopped us. Why didn't you bring the Bank of England back under direct government control? You didn't do that. Why? Because you had a disunited party behind you. They didn't want you as Prime Minister. The party members wanted you as Prime Minister. They wanted their man, Dishy, Rishi, Fishy, Sunak. That's who they wanted, and that's who they got in the end. They got their man. The person who was going to do exactly what the civil service wanted.
If he's appointed for 8 years, he can pretty much only be sacked for gross negligence. So he is able to make decisions about the economy independent of the elected government that have massive implications for people's lives.
This is the entire project that Tony Blair brought in. It was devolution for Scotland, devolution for Northern Ireland, devolution for Wales. Then it was enshrining the Human Rights Act 1998 that brought many of the ECHR protections into British statute and British law. Then it was the establishment of the Supreme Court, the independence of the Bank of England. All of these things were brought in under Tony Blair. She's not saying anything here specifically that wasn't done pre-1997. Liz, honey, sweetie, baby, what are you playing at? The Prime Minister is the highest power that we have in the land under the monarch. That is our system. That is the way our system works. When you're here on a podcast saying, don't blame me, it's not my fault, they stopped me, all I'm hearing is whining, complaining. Why is it always somebody else's fault?
So what has happened, and it's got particularly bad in the last 30 years since Tony Blair got into office, is lots of power that used to sit in the hands of elected people now sits in the hands of the unelected. Mm-hmm. And they are making decisions about monetary policy.
Who's letting them do that? The Tories were letting them do that. You allowed that. You facilitated. You allowed it to happen.
So what interest rates are, how much money the Bank of England prints, that's a decision the Bank of England essentially makes.
So the quantitative easing, the devaluation of our currency, the pound sterling, she's saying this was done independently with the Bank of England, both in the financial crisis in the late 2000s and during COVID a few years ago. It's about deflection of responsibility. This is the entire problem with everybody in the managerial state. It's never your fault, it's always somebody else's fault. You can always refer up or refer down. Nobody actually ever takes responsibility for their actions. This is the issue.
They're making decisions about fiscal policy. So if you look at the budget coming up, you'll hear a lot about the Office of Budget Responsibility, the OBR.
The OBR was actually made during Cameron and Clegg, during their governments. The Tories actually brought that in. A Blairite institution, because Cameron was the heir to Blair. He was there to continue what Tony Blair started. So the College of Policing, which neuters the police force, and the OBR, which puts basically the government and the Chancellor on guardrails so they can't actually do anything financially bold. That was brought in by the Tories themselves. and now she's blaming the very institution that her party, when in government, they created.
Yeah.
They're the people that essentially set the tram lines which the Chancellor has to operate in. And the same is true, by the way, for things like migration. You know, there's an independent government legal department that decides what's legal and what's illegal.
So there's an independent legal department that decides what's legal and what isn't illegal. Anything wrong with this picture? Of course. Parliament is sovereign. It debates and it passes legislation to what is legal and what is illegal. As I've already said, if your legal team come back to you to say it's illegal, make it legal.
I will make it legal.
It's as simple as that. You make it legal.
They are the people who are saying, sorry, but you've got to put these migrants up at 4-star hotels. You know, that's... So what I'm saying is...
What I'm saying is she's full of it. She is full of crap. If I was Prime Minister, I know you can dream. You can dream. We can all dream for Damien to be Prime Minister. You just do it. Someone says to you, we can't do that. I'll say, right. If you're not on board with what I'm saying, there's an envelope here with your severance package and your redundancy pay. Anyone can be laid off in the United Kingdom as long as it's done with a consultation period and you're doing it through a lawful process. Anyone can be made redundant. Alright, I've been made redundant a few times. Anyone can be made redundant. So if you get people blocking you and saying you can't do that, you say, right, okay, I'm going to go to Parliament. I've got a United Party behind me. They're going to ram it through and then it'll be legal. See how that works, Liz? The reason why you failed is because you didn't have a United Party. It's the same reason Keir Starmer can't even get the most modest benefit cuts through, because he's got a huge stonking majority, but it's a coalition on its all factions. There's no unity of purpose. Everybody's in it for themselves. There was no unity in the party, which is why both of the two-party systems, both of the two parties under the current system need whips. If there was true party discipline and there was a unity of cause, this wouldn't be necessary. Whipping wouldn't be necessary. You would not have to tell your MPs to vote a certain way, otherwise they're going to be removed from a political party. That would not be necessary. The reason why the two-party system is propping each other up like two corpses against each other is because of this very thing. There's no unity of purpose. There's no clarity of vision.
That this bureaucratic apparatus is there. It is essentially driving the decision-making of government, and ministers pretty much have to go along with it.
There's just an abdication of any responsibility. I feel for Liz Truss. I'm not saying the blob isn't there. I'm not saying there's a permanent bureaucracy there. I've mentioned it in my other channel before. Of course there is. And they're going to fight against any resistance, and they're going to fight against any change to the current setup, because it gives them influence, it gives them power, and more important than anything else, it gives them a nice golden goodbye and a gold-plated pension when they retire at the end of their career. Of course they're gonna be doing anything to keep that intact. But the miscalculation Liz made is she thought that they would just go along with anything that she said. She didn't have a United Party behind her, her party didn't want her, and they got rid of her. It's as simple as that. The real reason why her premiership failed is because she had a disunited party. There's been a lot of talk and there's been a lot of rumblings about Farage enforcing reforms, party line with an iron fist, and saying that there's no room for dissent, there's no room for debate. Is that an issue? This is why we've got a two-party system that's completely over, because nobody can get anything done, because nobody can decide on anything that needs to be done. If you've got a United Party, and many of your government ministers aren't even going to be drawn from Parliament, which, despite what everyone says, you do not need to be an MP or a peer to be a government minister. You don't even have to be an MP to be Prime Minister, for crying out loud. These are what's known as constitutional conventions. They're not legally enforceable. You need to take some responsibility. The reason why your government failed is because you were not prepared for government, you personally.
But with the Bank of England, though, for example, surely it's better. I would trust an expert in banking and finance than a politician.
Well, that makes you part of the globalist elite.
Oh,
basically,
wow.
JJ, you're part of the problem.
I'm part
You
of the
are,
problem.
because if you're basically saying you want the country run
By
unelected technocrats, you're not a Democrat. You're not a Democrat. You believe in unelected technocracy.
So we'll leave that one there. So there you have it. There's Liz Truss essentially blaming everybody in the country but herself for all the issues that we've had. The reason why Liz Truss's government failed is because she was ill prepared. She didn't have a united political party behind her. She had a disunited party. Let's be honest, if there was a united political party on either the left or the right, you get anything through. This is why Tony Blair got all of his radical reforms through in 1997 and reshaped Britain from the ground up, because he had a united party. This is what we need to go into with the next government. We need a unity of purpose. We need a united front. These are just my views. Your mileage may vary. MPs hold all the power. When Farage gets in, if he doesn't do anything to their liking, they can vote him out. But a unity of purpose to get the agenda through is essential. Otherwise the civil service, the blob and the deep state will smell it a mile off and they will draw blood. Now if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.